Hey guys, how's it going? Today's lesson is on photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. Okay, photosynthesis is a really important process because here you have a plant, okay, and here you have soil, right? Here's the soil. And what you do, right, is you add water to the soil, okay, and when you add water to the soil, right, the roots in the plant, they absorb that water in the soil, okay, so the water gets absorbed into the roots and they travel up to the leaf, so there's water in the leaf, and then you get sunlight, right, so here's the sun, right, and the sun is like beaming down on the plant, and then maybe you have an animal, so here's the animal, and the animal releases CO2, so your inputs are solar energy, okay? So you have solar energy, you have water, and you have CO2, and those are the inputs for photosynthesis. And the output is, what do plants release? Well, plants release O2, and plants also make sugar, C6H12O6. Right? So that's sugar. So the output is O2 and C6H12O6, oxygen and glucose. Okay? So the inputs for photosynthesis are solar energy, water, and CO2, and the outputs is oxygen and glucose. Now, plants are really special, right? And they're special because they can take the sunlight energy, and that sunlight energy, right? And they can use that oxygen and that CO2 and that water, and they can fuse it to make C6H12O6, right? Now, this C6H12O6 actually contains that solar energy inside of its bonds, and we say that the bonds inside this glucose is called chemical potential energy. Okay, so when I say chemical potential energy, well, this is a chemical, right? Because in chemistry, you deal with carbon and like the chemicals of the periodic table. So this is a chemical. Potential means it's stored, and it's stored energy. It's energy stored in these chemical bonds, right? This glucose. And it's actually the energy from the sun that's stored in these bonds. And when you eat this, you actually release that solar energy that you stored, and that's used to make you move and grow, right? So you can see, right, in this that I showed you, it's really important to understand that energy is flowing. Energy flows, okay? So in this case, energy flows from the sun, right? From the sun to the plant, sun, plant to you. So energy is flowing from one organism to another, to plant to you. Energy flows. That's different, right? And that has to do with the laws of thermodynamics. Thermodynamics. So the law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. Okay, so energy just is, right? You can't create it, you can't destroy it. So the energy that's powering your body as we speak is no, you can't, when you die, that energy is not like gone. It's still there, right? Like you can't create energy, you can't destroy it. So the problem is like people are like, then when you die, where does your energy go? If you can't destroy it, where does it go? Well, I don't know. I don't know where it goes. Maybe it's trapped by something else. Who knows, right? But the law of thermodynamics says that energy, as far as we know, you can't create it, you can't make it. It just is. You can't destroy it, right? That's the weird thing about energy. But energy can be transformed, meaning that energy can be transformed, meaning you can take light energy from the sun, and you can store it in chemical bonds. Okay, so here you're taking light energy from the sun and you're storing it in C6H12O6. So you're taking energy and you're transforming it. You're transforming it from sunlight, from the sun, and to bonds inside a glucose molecule that you eat and you release, right? And that's true of even electricity, where you burn coal and you release this stored energy in coal and you use it for electricity, right? So again, you're transforming the energy, right? So you can transform energy from one form to the other, but you can't create or destroy it. And those are the two laws of thermodynamics, right? So the thing about plants that is really fundamental is like, now that you understand how energy flows, okay, when we deal with photosynthesis, okay, and the flow of energy through plants, right, we have to learn how the plants do it. Well, it's really important to understand the electromagnetic spectrum. Okay, so the electromagnetic spectrum is basically when the sun shines on Earth, okay, when the sun shines on Earth, there's all these different wavelengths of light, right, that the sun emits. So the sun can emit gamma rays. Okay, this is kind of hard to see, so we're going to write gamma rays. These guys are like intense X-rays, UV rays, all these rays the sun emits. And these are like high energy waves. But the sun also emits like visible light. Okay, and this visible light allows us to see. Okay, so you and I can see because the sun emits visible light. If there was no sunlight, then you and I wouldn't be able to see. It's like when you're downstairs and you shut the lights off and you pull the curtains down, right, and it's midnight, well, and you open your eyes, you can't see anything because there's no light. It is only because of light that allows you to see. In the absence of light, none of you would be able to perceive any kind of color, right? So visible light is really important. It's emitted by light, okay, like sunlight emits visible light. Other things that are emitted by the sun are like microwaves and thermal energy waves, so they're called infrared waves. And we also have radio waves. But for the purpose of this lesson, we are mostly concerned with visible light. So when you deal with visible light rays, you're dealing with what we call Roy G. Biv. Okay, so you're dealing with red. Oh, that's bad. Okay, you're dealing with red wavelengths. Okay, and then they go from red to orange. Okay, and then they go from orange to yellow, and they're going from yellow to green, and they're going from green to blue, and then they're going from blue to indigo, and then indigo to violet. So you can see, like, when we look at this spectrum, the longest wavelengths are red, and the shortest wavelength is violet, right? So this is what we perceive as color. This is the visible light spectrum, okay? So this is what you and I can see. So we can see it within these range of colors, Roy G. Biv, right? And so the longest is the red and the shortest is the violet, which means that the violet has the most energy because it has the shortest wavelength. And the shorter the wavelength, the higher the frequency. Right? So the higher the frequency and the more energy it has. The longer the wavelength, the less energy it has, right? So if you have a red flame and a blue flame, the blue flame is going to be hotter because it's emitting more energy, right? The red flame is going to be less hot. So how do you see things, and what does this what does this have to do with plants? Well, the thing is plants, if you look at this Roy G. Biv spectrum, plants actually reflect green light. And they're able to do this because they have a structure called the chloroplast, which you learned about in Science 10. So that means that this part of the spectrum, okay, maybe into here too, like this part, they reflect. So that means that if they reflect green, that's whenever you reflect, that's what you guys see. Okay, so if you see the color yellow on somebody's shirt, it's because their shirt is reflecting yellow. So what are they doing? If it's reflecting yellow, what's happening to the rest of the spectrum? The rest of the spectrum is being absorbed. Absorbed. Okay, so if you're a plant and you're green, a green plant looks green because it's reflecting the green part of the electromagnetic spectrum, of the visible light spectrum. So green plant reflects green, but it's absorbing red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, violet. It's absorbing all the rest of the spectrum. So that's how plants work. Okay, so they reflect a part of the visible light and then they absorb the rest of it. If you're wearing the color white, white actually reflects all of it. So white, because it reflects red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, blue, and violet, it doesn't tend to warm up quickly. It's opposite to black, because if you're wearing black, okay, if you're wearing black, black actually absorbs red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. So it gets hot fast. White actually reflects red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. So it remains cool, right? So that's how things work. And if you see, again, if you see the color blue, it's because your shirt is reflecting blue, but it's absorbing every other color. It's absorbing red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, violet, right? So that's how you see. And the reason why you see is because of pigments, okay? So pigments can reflect wavelengths of light, and pigments can absorb wavelengths of light. So when we look at chloroplast, okay, so we're going to look at chloroplast because we're going to look at the plant cell. So here's a plant cell, and you guys should remember from Science 10, there's like a cell wall on the plant, and then there's the nucleus, right? But we're looking at a very important structure called the chloroplast, okay? So here's the chloroplast of the plant, and the chloroplast actually has a distinct structure, which we're going to look at right now. So if you take a look at the chloroplast, but before I do the chloroplast, I just want you guys to take a look. Sometimes you're going to see what we call an absorption spectrum. So let me just draw this. This is going to be called an absorption spectrum. Okay, so basically, if you see a line like this, and then it goes down like this, and then it kind of goes back like this, and this is like wavelengths of light. Okay, and the wavelengths of light are measured in nanometers. So let's say this is 700 nanometers, and this is 400 nanometers. Well, 700 nanometers would refer to red, 400 nanometers would refer to violet, okay? And if we look at the wavelength of light, and this is the percentage absorbed, well, where are you absorbing the light? So red is here, let's say orange is here, yellow is here, green, blue, indigo, and then violet. Okay, so tell me, where would you find maximum absorption? Well, you would find maximum absorption here, from red to yellow. That's where you're absorbing the light. But what about here? Like green and blue has less absorption. So these are what you're actually reflecting. And this, again, you're absorbing a lot of blue, indigo, and violet. So you can see that if this is my absorption spectrum, it's showing me that I'm absorbing these wavelengths of light, and that these wavelengths of light are not being absorbed as much. So these must be being reflected and then absorbing here. So here's the peak of our absorption. We're absorbing this, we're absorbing this, this here, we're reflecting, okay? So that's the absorption spectrum. Now when we look at the structure of the chloroplast, so this is a chloroplast, okay? Like it kind of looks like the mitochondria we did, where we have an outer membrane to the chloroplast, and then we have an inner membrane to the chloroplast, okay? So there's two membranes to the chloroplast, and then we have these stacks, okay? These stacks are called the grana, and they guys are made up of individual, okay, thylakoid discs. So this is a thylakoid disc. Okay, so an individual, so here's another stack, here's another stack, here's another stack, right? I see all these grana, right? Here's a stack, here's a stack, here's a stack, here's a stack, and each grana is made up of a thylakoid disc. You see that? So those are my thylakoid discs. All right. And this grana is surrounded by like a fluid. So there's this fluid that surrounds it. So we're going to draw the fluid that surrounds it. The fluid that surrounds it is called the stroma. Okay, so let's just go through this. This is the chloroplast. Okay, the chloroplast is found inside a plant cell. And if you look inside the chloroplast, you have these stacks called grana. The grana is made up of these individual thylakoid discs. So I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 thylakoid discs in this grana. Okay, and this grana is surrounded by this fluid called stroma. All right, and that is the structure of the chloroplast. Now, if you look at the thylakoid disc carefully, okay, here's the thylakoid disc. The thylakoid disc also has a membrane. So this is the membrane of the thylakoid disc. And inside the thylakoid disc, that's where you see the pigment. And the pigment is called chlorophyll. Okay? So the chloroplast contains chlorophyll. The chlorophyll is the pigment, and it is found in the membrane of the thylakoid disc. This is called the lumen of the thylakoid. And that is basically the parts of the chloroplast that you need to know. Okay, so I'm done this first lesson on photosynthesis, and then I'm going to get into the light-dependent reaction.